Here we go. Will it entail overhead costs? I apologize. All right, so we've answered that question. That question is yes. And again, it just depends on your type of operation and itemization of those overhead costs. For instance, for someone like myself, who is a business consultant and I work remotely and primarily with a computer, I can do most of my work using the computer exclusively. My overhead costs are significantly less than maybe a mechanic shop. Okay, and we'll go over what exactly are overhead costs. Well, you've heard this term, and literally these are the costs. You can associate it with the indication of the compound word, over your head. For instance, with that mechanic shop, by law, there is a requirement that they actually have a facility and it must be up to code. That facility is, quote unquote, over their head. Okay. The electricity bill, again, overhead costs. Insurance, overhead costs. Water. Oftentimes for commercial properties, they do pay for water. Oftentimes that is not necessarily in a commercial landlord or a lease application. It's not normally included. And even where it is still overhead costs, and it's probably included in your lease payment each month from your landlord. So you may not see it explicitly, but I'm sure that it's implicitly in the cost of the lease. All right. So in my case, with a business consulting firm, my overhead costs would, of course, be the computer. And with technology and the advancements in technology, we know that we make these changes so that I can keep up and make sure that my computer is up to date and is efficient in running. And oftentimes I have to replace my computer every 3, maybe 4 years. So that replacement cost is something that I add into my cost of operation or my cost of goods sold. It is part of my overhead. Anything that I need to pay for to keep my operation going is over my head. It is overhead cost. But you'll see, again, the difference is pretty substantial. Whereas I may have maybe the computer costs and business insurance and travel costs, which ironically enough are offset by fuel tax credits that I receive each year for my corporation when I file my federal tax return for the corporation. The mechanic shop has significantly more. I don't have traditional employees. That's another overhead cost. Whereas a mechanic shop generally has traditional employees, an administrator, an administrative assistant, maybe a cashier, someone up front. Then the mechanics that they hire. In my case, I often have the opportunity to hire subcontractors and hire by performance only. That means I only need a specific job performed and I pay them for that very specific job. And then the employment, quote unquote, contract is resolved and finished. All right, let's keep going. So is space required by law? Again, as I mentioned, there are certain places where space is required by law. This may be a creative space, like maybe in the food industry, but a space is required. Okay, so you have the restaurant, you have the food truck. Another example where a space is absolutely and explicitly required by law is a auto sales operation. And that is zoned specifically. There are municipal codes in place that govern that auto sales space. Okay. If it's not required by law, some may want a space for operation. I have held commercial leases outside of my home and both ends. So it's not necessarily required by law that a business consultant have a separate space exclusive for their business operation. But some may prefer to work outside of their home. Maybe they feel that they can't get work done or be as productive in their home. Or maybe they will have many visitors and they don't want visitors at their home. That would be an example of when a space is not required by law, but required for operation or preferred for operation. Okay? Now let's move on to the cost of goods sold. We've got about 3 minutes here. We already mentioned that everything over your head is an overhead cost. All right? These are the costs of operation or the costs of goods sold. These are economic terms, and they are generally self-explanatory, especially now that you kind of have an idea of exactly what they entail. This is where a lot of businesses, new business owners, and unfortunately some veteran business owners fall into a trap of failing to set their price to include all of their costs of goods sold. For example, if you are going to sell water, okay, and let's say you sell water by the glass, and you set your price arbitrarily at $5. All right, so we've got a $5 glass of water. That's good water. All right, so it's worth the $5. However, there are businesses or business owners who fail to include certain costs as a glass cleaning service, a glass cleaning and delivery service. And I know this full well. I used to own a wine shop in North Carolina. Some of you are familiar with it, Passion Fruit in downtown Greensboro. And based on the laws that govern the wine shops, those that sell wine exclusively, and the laws that govern sanitation, from the food industry, I had to hire a wine glass delivery and cleaning service. Let's say you don't add that into your cost. Now you're paying for that. So your $5 should include any employees that you hire. And there's a very finite way to do this, to find this math. We'll go over this next week, setting price and the equation for that. You need to make sure that if you had insurance, or insurance is required by law for your operation, that is also included in your price of this glass of water. You also need to include the wholesale price of the water. Let's say that you're not getting it, maybe you're not filtering it yourself through some operation, some approved operation on your site, and you're actually having it delivered in. There may be a separate cost for the delivery. Some wholesalers don't pay for the delivery. That's your cost. Or you may have it expedited. And there are wholesale deliverers that will send, they will definitely ship your merchandise at their cost. However, they will not expedite it at their cost. And so maybe you have to pay those fees. So that would also have to be in the cost of, or the price of your water. And I understand, I feel that you understand exactly how intricate this can become. All right? Lastly, how do you set price? This again is going to be the equation that we will specifically go into greater detail in next week. And we'll probably spend a great deal of time on that, probably the majority of the week, because it is such an important and vital component of the success and longevity of one's business. That's our time for the day. I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful weekend.